especially if they're gargoyles. So, you want to have some way to deal with that, and a level 3 Hawk helps. It's just a really nice scouting tool because of the invisibility, and it does a pretty good sizable amount of damage. Also, if he switches to Abominations, which a lot of Undeads will do if they're losing with gargoyles, the level 3 Hawk is a good thing to have. And so you'll see what Moon's doing here. He's gotten up to 80 food, like I said. He had the resource advantage, so he crept hard, got to 80 food, and then hit, which is what you generally do when you get an expansion. And one thing a lot of Night Elf players worry about when they mass Dryads is how to stop the Undead base. Undead bases are pretty scary when you have mass Dryads and no way to counter the towers. Well, he got Sappers. Don't forget about Sappers. I often do, and just don't. They're a very, very, very good answer to Undead towers. They kill a tower in one hit while doing damage to other nearby buildings. And they're a great way to deal with Undead base, especially when you're massing Dryads and don't have a way to do a lot of damage to buildings. So you'll see that again, Moon is choosing to fight in a situation that really at best is going to be a trade for him. He's losing units, Sweet's losing units, but he is losing a lot of units. Why would he do this? We're in Sweet's base. Why would he give Sweet the chance to get back into this game? Well, when you think about it, he's not really. He knows, he's been scouting that corner expansion, and he knows that Sweet doesn't have it up yet. Meanwhile, he does have an expansion, and meanwhile he's killed, 3 or 4 of Sweet's acolytes. So, if he was really just trading units right there, which is pretty much what happened, I think, he, after the unit trade, he comes out with the ability to produce and recover from it much, much faster than Sweet did. You notice he actually has 3 Ancients of Lore right now to go along with his expansion. Excuse me. Let me get a drink real quick. 3 Ancients of War, an expansion. So he has 3 production buildings, while Sweet has 0. He has an expansion, while Sweet doesn't. And meanwhile, Sweet can't even produce units at all because all of his Ziggurats died. So, Moon trades units. They have an equal-sized army for the fraction of a second that it takes for that fight to be over. But then Moon can very, very quickly reproduce his army, especially given the very fast build time of Dryads. So he's going to be able to come back and very quickly win this game. So there are times when just trading like that actually works out to your advantage. And if you watch the replays from these top players, you'll notice that they're good at knowing when those times are. Even if it looks like a fight is at the best going to be even for somebody, a lot of times an even fight actually works out to their advantage, because Sweet suffered a lot more from losing units there than Moon did. So you'll see that Moon is in a very good position right now. He was able to use his Hawk to harass that corner expansion, like I mentioned. And his own expansion is steadily up and running. He just has a lot of production ability. He really doesn't need to even go to tier 3 because he's producing so fast that he's going to have so many Dryads that really nothing Sweet can make will be able to handle it. If Sweet could get up to an 80 food army, he could fight it a little better, but that's just not going to happen. Because Moon has continued to fight him, so Sweet's been losing a lot of units, and then now there was that big push in which all of Sweet's Ziggurats died. So Moon already is back up to a near 80 food army, and there's no way that Sweet could be. So he's just going to run right back to the base and try to end the game. And you'll notice from the length of the replay that that's probably going to happen. So, this has been a pretty decisive victory for Moon. You'll notice he's even putting another expansion over on the left-hand side. If there's any way for you to mass expand versus Undead, it's almost always a good idea. Undead is tough. That's very important to remember as a Night Elf player. Undead is tough. You don't want to get into a situation where you're fighting with equal resources and equal hero levels. I mean, if you're way better than the Undead player, sure, yeah, you can win. But it is hard. You don't want to get into a situation where it's a late game fight, you have the same resource production, and the Undead has the same hero levels. I guarantee that it's going to be very, very difficult for you to come out on top, even though it seems like you ought to be able to if you're outplaying them. It's just hard. That is working to the Undead racial advantage of having very strong hero spells, a lot of movement speed, the ability to use a small army very effectively, all that kind of stuff. You don't want to get into that kind of situation, so it's just a question of how do you avoid it. And like I said, there are a number of different approaches. You know, probably some of you have seen the Dark Ranger Fire Lord Tier 2 push, which is one way to handle the problem, which I've always found pretty amusing. You know, like stop the undead late game by just not letting it happen, being like, I'm going to kill you before your heroes get past level 3. Okay, yeah, that's one way to handle it. Of course, you know, if it goes badly, it's kind of hard to come back from that sometimes, so it's just a question of whether you have that sort of do-or-die mentality as a Warcraft player. A lot of people don't. A more secure method, obviously, is to just establish map control, or as best you can anyways, and you can do that with resources. Your racial advantage as a Night Elf player is one of your racial advantages anyway, is your ability to establish resource advantage. You should always remember that. Night Elves are very good at expanding, and that is one thing that you shouldn't downplay about your race as a Night Elf player. And that is one way, and a very good way, and probably one of the most popular ways at the highest level to combat the undead advantages. So you'll see that Moon's strategy in this particular case was constructed and in every detail to make sure that he established that resource advantage. You know, like I said, he went solo hero to allow him to produce more units to defend the expansion. He stayed at Tier 2 to allow him to produce more units to defend the expansion, all in the name of making sure that expansion got up and stayed up. If that expansion had died, all of a sudden you're in that situation that you don't want to be with on Undead, especially on Twisted Meadows, where they can even expand themselves in a place where you can't kill it. So you want to put a lot of effort. If you're going to expand early, which is, like I said, you know, one way to fight Undead, you want to make sure that you put a lot of effort into keeping that expansion up, and that's what Moon did. So that's one way to handle Undead. There are a lot of other ways to approach the matchup. I think it's a really interesting matchup with a lot of options and hero choices, especially on the Night Elf side. But that is one way to handle it, and I think it's a pretty good way, very effective way to use, you know, a pretty simple army. You know, pretty much just massing Dryads there. He didn't really make much else to handle the undead if they're going gargoyles. Again, you know, this particular situation was tailored to gargoyles. It might have been a little bit different if Sweet had done something else, but Gargoyle says that the undead's going to be having a big Tier 2 army that could easily kill your expansion, and so you need to counter that somehow, and Moon's answer to that in this case was to go mass Dryads. It's not a solve-all for undead, but it is good against gargoyles. You know, one thing to bear in mind with replays is that if you see a strategy that looks really awesome and, you know, one player totally beat the other ones, it doesn't mean that you can do that strategy all the time in every match. You have to pay attention to why the players are doing every little thing they're doing, why they're making those choices in this particular situation. You know, what have they seen? What are they scouting? What are they anticipating? What are they countering? And in this case, Moon was countering a Tier 2 push with massing Tier 2 units and staying solo hero. And he was able to carry that particular strategy to a victory because Sweet did not change his strategy. He continued to go gargoyles. He only had one abomination at the end of the game. So Moon was able to carry that all the way through. So yeah, I think that covers all the major points I wanted to talk about with this particular replay. And I hope you guys enjoy the commentary. I will be back again in a couple weeks to bring you something different. All right, this is Balance from WCReplays.com. Talk to you later.